The morning my brother walked back into my life, I was doing what I always do at 6 in the morning. I was standing at the kitchen window with a cup of black coffee watching the fog roll in off the fields the way it does in October in eastern Tennessee. The hills were just starting to catch color, burnt orange and deep red bleeding through the mist. And I was thinking about nothing in particular. Just the coffee. Just the quiet. I had earned that quiet. My name is Dale Mercer. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a firefighter in Knox County before my knee gave out and forced me into early retirement. The house I live in sits on 42 acres of family land that my father worked until his back would not let him anymore. I grow soybeans on the lower field. I keep a small vegetable garden. I fix other people's tractors for extra money. It is not a glamorous life, but it is mine, and the most important part of it is the two people sleeping down the hall. My niece, Maya, is 16. She is sharp-tongued and brilliant, already talking about pre-med. My nephew, Cooper, is 14. He is quiet and serious in a way that makes people twice his age uncomfortable because he sees everything and forgets nothing. I have been raising them for 12 years. I fed them every meal. I sat in every parent-teacher conference. I drove to every cross-country meet and every science fair. I am the one who taught Cooper how to change a tire and taught Maya how to throw a punch if she ever needed to. 12 years ago, my brother left them here and never came back. So when I heard the knock at the front door that October morning, I set down my coffee slowly. I already felt it in my chest, the same feeling I used to get on the rig when the pressure gauges started climbing toward the red. Something was wrong before I even opened the door. There were two of them on my porch. My brother was standing on the left. I almost did not recognize him. The last time I saw him, he was thin and yellow-skinned, wearing a hoodie with a cigarette burn in the sleeve, holding a baby in one arm and a diaper bag in the other. The man standing on my porch now was wearing a charcoal gray suit. His hair was clean and cut close. He had a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my truck. On the right stood a woman I did not know. She was maybe 40, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She had the kind of face that has spent years telling people news they do not want to hear and has stopped apologizing for it. My brother looked me dead in the eye and said, "Dale, we need to talk about the children." That was when I understood this was not a visit. This was an operation. The woman introduced herself as Patricia Oakes. She was an attorney out of Nashville. She handed me a legal document before I had even moved aside to let them in. I took it from her hand, the way you take a hot coal, carefully, knowing it is going to burn you. It was a petition for emergency custody. My brother was claiming that I had taken Maya and Cooper from him without consent, that I had manipulated them into believing he was dead, that I had isolated them from family and subjected them to an unstable home environment. There were words in that document I will not repeat, describing me as volatile, controlling, and mentally unfit. There were 3 pages of accusations, none of them true, and every single one of them notarized. I looked up from the papers. My brother was watching me read. He did not look guilty. He looked impatient. "You've got to be out of your mind," I said. "Dale, you left. You dropped 2 babies on my couch 12 years ago and you drove away. Cooper was not even 2 years old. Maya had just turned 4. My brother looked at his lawyer. She tilted her head slightly, the way a dog does when it hears a strange sound. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice flat and professional, "my client acknowledges that there was a period of difficulty in his life. He has since completed rehabilitation and is now a fully capable parent. He has legal parental rights to both children, and those rights have never been terminated. He has never paid a dime of child support." I said, "That is a separate matter. He has never called. He has never sent a birthday card. Cooper doesn't even know what he looks like. Mr. Mercer." Her voice sharpened just slightly. "You are not these children's legal guardian. You never filed for guardianship. You never petitioned the courts. In the eyes of Tennessee law, you are a private citizen who has been housing 2 minors without authorization. My client is their father. He is here to take them home." There it was, the quiet way You say the most devastating thing. I thought about Cooper down the hall, still asleep with his dog at his feet. I thought about Maya's college prep books, stacked on her desk. I thought about every single day of the last 12 years. The stomach flu at 2 a.m., the busted lip from the bike crash, the time Maya sat in my arms for an hour after a boy said something cruel to her at school. I thought about the morning my brother left. He had shown up at my door in the middle of August without calling. He looked like he had not slept in 3 days. He was shaking, and not from cold. He said he owed money to people who were not patient. He said he just needed a week, maybe 2, just until things cooled down. He said he would be back before Maya's next dentist appointment. He handed me Maya and Cooper, and he got into a truck I had never seen before, and he left. That was 12 years ago. And now he was standing on my porch in a suit that cost more than I make in 4 months, telling me he wanted them back. I looked at him over the top of those papers. I kept my voice steady. "Get off my property," I said. "Both of you. Right now." The attorney smiled the way people smile when they are about to tell you that they do not actually have to do what you say. "We have a court date, Mr. Mercer. November 9th. If you try to leave the state with these children before then, or if you attempt to coach them in any way, I will have you in contempt before noon. You will receive the formal summons by end of day." My brother finally looked at me again. For just a second, something moved behind his eyes. It was not shame. It looked more like calculation, like a man checking a column of numbers and confirming they add up. Then he turned and walked back down my porch steps. I stood in the doorway watching his rental car back down my gravel driveway until it disappeared around the tree line. Then I went inside and sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall for a long time. Maya appeared in the doorway about 10 minutes later. She had heard voices. She could read my face before she even sat down. "Who was here?" she asked. I looked at my niece. This girl who used to fall asleep on my chest watching cartoons. This girl I had watched grow into someone fierce and capable and kind. "Your father," I said. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then her face went absolutely still, in the way that meant she was thinking hard and fast. "What does he want?" "You," I said. "You and Cooper both." She sat down at the table across from me. She did not cry. She did not panic. She folded her hands in front of her and looked at me the way she looks at a biology exam she is not afraid of. "Then we need to figure out how to stop him," she said. That was when I understood that I had raised exactly the right kind of person. I spent the morning on the phone with a lawyer in Knoxville who told me, in the careful language of someone trying not to scare a client while also telling them the truth, that my situation was complicated. I had no formal guardianship. My brother's parental rights had never been terminated because I had never initiated that process. I had simply taken the children in and raised them, which was the right and human thing to do, but which meant that legally I was standing on sand. The lawyer told me that if my brother had genuinely rehabilitated, and if he had the financial means to provide for the children, a judge might very well rule in his favor. "Tennessee family courts," he said, "lean toward biological parents when there is no abuse history and no formal termination of rights on record." I did not tell the lawyer what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, why now? My brother had been absent for 12 years. He had not called when our father was dying. He had not shown up for the funeral. He had not asked about the children once in over a decade. And now, 4 months after our father's death, he was standing on my porch in a $3,000 to $1,000 suit demanding custody. My father left a will. I knew that. He left the 42 acres to both of us equally. He left his savings, about $60,000, to be divided evenly. It was not a fortune. It was not a life-changing sum of money for 2 grown men. It was a nice gesture from a man who worked hard his whole life and never had much to show for it. But there was something else. Something my father had done quietly, without telling anyone. About 3 years before he died, he had established a small trust. Not for me, not for my brother, for Maya and Cooper. My father had loved those kids in the particular way that grandparents do. without complication, without history, without the weight of all the ways a parent can disappoint you. He had watched me raise them, and he had wanted to do something for them, something lasting. He did not have much, but he had land. And land in that part of Tennessee had started appreciating fast. He had a small life insurance policy, about $350,000, and he had put it all into a trust for his 2 grandchildren. The trust was locked until they each turned 21. But there was an annual stipend. The legal guardian of the trust beneficiaries was entitled to a management fee of $40,000 a year, and the legal guardian had administrative access to the estate for the children's benefit, which included the right to sell the farmland. 40 acres in that county. At current prices, that was somewhere close to $800,000. My brother had not come back for his children. He had come back for the deed. I sat with that knowledge for 1 full day before I called Russ. Russ Hartley has been my best friend since we were 9 years old. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, came back with a slight shake in his left hand and about 40% hearing in his right ear, and has spent the last 30 years working as a skip tracer for bail bondsmen across the Southeast. He finds people who do not want to be found. He is 67 years old, barrel-chested, half-deaf, and the most effective investigator I have ever met, which is saying something, given that I spent 30 years working alongside people who investigated fire scenes for a living. I told Russ everything over the phone. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. He got a lawyer from Nashville? Russ said. Patricia Oakes. Another pause. She's good. She's expensive. That woman doesn't take cases for people who can't pay. He was broke 12 years ago, I said. He was borrowing money from drug dealers. He's not broke now, Russ said. Give me 24 hours. Russ called me back the next evening. He was eating something. I could hear the crunch of it through the phone. Okay, he said. So, your brother's been living in Atlanta for the last 8 years. He had a rough stretch, but he got clean, which I'll give him. He's been working in property management. Nothing fancy, decent enough living. About 6 months ago, something changed. He filed a new LLC, got 3 new credit cards, started making deposits that don't match his salary. Where's the money coming from? I asked. That's where it gets interesting, Russ said. I could hear him set down whatever he was eating. He filed a legal brief in Davidson County about 4 months ago. An inquiry into your father's estate. Specifically, the trust. He found out about the trust. His lawyer found out about the trust. Oakes specializes in contested inheritance cases. Dale. She found that trust before your father was even in the ground. I sat down on the edge of the kitchen table. He's not trying to be their father, I said. He's trying to be their guardian. Russ said. There's a difference. As their biological father, if he gets custody, he becomes the trustee by default. That's how it's structured. He gets the $40,000 a year management fee, and, more importantly, he gets the authority to petition for early dissolution of the trust on the grounds that the land is deteriorating without proper management. Your father's lawyer told me this. Off the record, I thought about my brother's face on the porch. That moment when something moved behind his eyes. He's going to sell the farm, I said. The minute he gets a judge to agree, Russ said. Dale. There's one more thing. Tell me. He's filing in Knox County Family Court. Judge Harold Sims. I know people who know Sims. He's not corrupt, but he has a long history of ruling in favor of biological parents when there's no abuse on record. Your brother's lawyer knows this. She filed in that court on purpose. I hung up the phone and walked outside. The night air smelled like wood smoke and cold earth. I stood on the porch for a long time, looking at the fields. Somewhere under the south pasture barn, behind a loose stone in the foundation wall, inside a fireproof lockbox that my father had given me 17 years ago and told me to keep safe, there was a document, a piece of paper I had almost used once before and then decided against, hoping I would never need it. I had kept it because my father raised me to keep things, to document things, to understand that words said out loud disappear. But words written down and witnessed and dated become something that cannot be undone. I went back inside, I found Russ's number and called him again. "I need a favor," I said. "A big one." Russ showed up the next morning in his old Silverado. He brought coffee and a box of donuts, and an attitude that told me he had already been thinking about the problem since I hung up. I told him about the lockbox. I told him what was in it. Russ ate a donut and thought about it for a while. "You sure you want to go this route?" he said. "I don't have another route," I said. "It's going to hurt them," he said. He was not talking about my brother or the lawyer. I thought about Maya and Cooper. I thought about how much I had protected them from over the years, how carefully I had managed what they knew about where they came from, and why they were with me. I thought about the story I had told Cooper when he was 7, and asked why he did not have a dad like his friends did. I had told him that his father was a man who had some problems, and that some people's problems are bigger than they are, and that it did not mean Cooper was not loved. It was as kind a version of the truth as I could give a 7-year-old. "I know," I said to Russ, "but they're going to find out eventually. I'd rather they find out with me standing next to them than after he's dragged them to Atlanta." Russ nodded slowly. He finished his coffee. "Then here's what we're going to do," he said. "The week before the court date was the worst week of my life, and I have had some bad weeks. I have pulled people out of burning buildings. I have knocked on doors and told families things that cannot be untold. But sitting in my own house, while a clock ran down toward a hearing that could take my children away, that was a different kind of hard. It was the kind that does not let you sleep and does not let you eat and sits on your chest like something with weight." My brother's lawyer had been efficient. She had submitted declarations from 2 people in my county. People I recognized. People I had thought I knew. One was a woman who had lived 3 roads over from me for 15 years. She declared that she had witnessed me screaming at the children on multiple occasions and that Cooper had once told her son he wished he could leave. The other was a man I had sold a tractor part to 2 summers ago. He declared that I had a volatile temper and had threatened him during a dispute over a bill. The dispute, for the record, was that he had not paid me for 6 weeks, and I had sent him a firmly worded letter. That was the extent of my threatening. Both declarations had been gathered within the last 3 weeks. Both people had received something from my brother's attorney. I did not know what. I did not need to know. I understood the architecture of what was being built around me, and I understood that money was the cement holding it together. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. I was sitting at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning when I heard footsteps in the hall. Maya appeared in the doorway. She was wearing her oversized track sweatshirt, and her hair was pulled back. She looked at me the way she sometimes does, the way that makes me forget she is 16. "Tell me what we're up against," she said. She sat down across from me. "We're up against someone who has money and a good lawyer," I said. "Do we have anything?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I have something in the barn," I said, "but if I use it, there are things you're going to learn about your father that I have spent a long time protecting you from." She folded her hands on the table. Her jaw was set. "Tell me," she said. So I told her. Not everything. Not all the ugly granular detail of who her father had been when she was a baby, but enough. I told her about the night he left. I told her about what was in the lockbox. I told her what Russ had found out about the trust. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. The refrigerator hummed. The kitchen clock ticked. "He doesn't want us," she said. Not a question. "No," I said. "I'm sorry." She nodded slowly. Then she looked at me, and her eyes were dry, which was somehow harder to see than if she had been crying. "Use it," she said. "Whatever's in that box, use it." In the courtroom the next morning, everything felt too small. The gallery was packed. My brother sat at the plaintiff's table in another perfect suit. Patricia Oakes sat beside him with her portfolio open and her reading glasses on. She looked like a woman who had already decided how this was going to go. My lawyer's name was Gerald Ferris. He was 60 years old, had been practicing family law in Knox County for over 30 years, and had a habit of speaking quietly so that people had to lean in to hear him. He had reviewed the lockbox documents the night before. When he finished reading, he had been silent for a long time, and then he had said, Dale, why didn't you bring this to me before today? Ungram friend. I kept hoping I wouldn't have to use it, I said. He had looked at me over his glasses. That's the most honest thing I've ever heard a client say. Judge Sims was a compact man with silver hair and a reputation, as Russ had warned me, for favoring biology over circumstance. He looked at me from the bench the way you look at something you've already categorized and labeled. He had read the declarations. He had seen my brother's well-prepared filing. I watched him the way I used to watch a building I was about to enter, looking for the exits. My brother's lawyer opened her case efficiently. She presented 12 years of absence as a period of personal difficulty, not abandonment. She presented his rehabilitation as evidence of transformation. She presented his financial stability as proof of readiness. She called one of her declared witnesses, the woman from 3 roads over, who sat in the box and did not look at me once while she said the things she had been paid to say. I sat and listened and kept my hands flat on the table. Gerald touched my arm once. Your turn soon, he said quietly. When the judge turned to the defense, Gerald stood up. He was calm and methodical, and he laid out the 12 years of school records, medical records, tax returns, showing my income and expenses for the children, letters from teachers and coaches and Maya's guidance counselor. He established, piece by piece, the architecture of a real life, a real family. Then he said, Your Honor, I'd like to introduce one piece of physical evidence. He nodded at me. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and I took out the document. It was in a clear plastic sleeve, the way Gerald had asked me to bring it. The paper inside was old, the edges soft with age, but the ink was clear, and the notary stamp at the bottom was unmistakable. Gerald walked it to the clerk. The clerk handed it to the judge. I watched my brother. The first thing he did was look at the document. The second thing he did was look at his lawyer. The third thing he did was look at me, and I saw it. The same thing I had seen on his face that morning on the porch, but different now, calculated, was gone. What replaced it was something raw. Judge Sims read the document. He read it with the careful attention of a man who has spent decades reading legal documents and has developed a specific kind of stillness when something surprises him. Then, he read it again. Then he looked up. The document was a voluntary statement, signed by my brother and notarized by a public notary in Knox County on August 22nd, 12 years ago. 3 days after he left the children with me. He had come back, not to get them back. He had driven back to my house 3 days later while I was at work, and he had knocked on my neighbor's door, an older man named Bill Cooley who has since passed, and he had asked Bill to witness something. Bill was a notary. My brother had known this. The document stated, in my brother's own handwriting, that he was voluntarily relinquishing physical custody of Maya and Cooper Mercer to me, Dale Mercer, their uncle, on the grounds that he was unable to provide for their safety or welfare, that he was doing so of his own free will, that he understood this to be a binding statement of his intentions, that he was not being coerced, and at the bottom, in a line that made the gallery go quiet when Gerald read it aloud, my brother had written, I do not expect to return. I am not the right person to raise these kids. Dale is. I'm signing this because I want him to know he doesn't have to worry about me changing my mind. He had signed it. Bill Cooley had notarized it. And my father, who had been standing in my kitchen when my brother knocked on Bill's door, and who had walked over to watch, had signed as a second witness. I had found it in the lockbox 3 weeks after my father died. My father had kept it all those years without telling me. He had kept it because he understood, even then, what it meant and what it might one day be needed for. The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Sims set the document down on his bench. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked at my brother. He looked at the attorney. He looked at the notary stamp with the expression of a man who has just watched the foundation of something important collapse. Patricia Oakes was already on her feet. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the calculation in it, the rapid adjustment. Your Honor, we would request a forensic examination of that document. My client has no recollection of signing anything of this nature. It may be. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Maya walked in. She was still in her school clothes. She had a backpack on one shoulder and she was walking fast and her chin was up, and she looked like someone who has decided something and is not looking back. She had taken the bus. She had left school at lunch without telling anyone, and she had taken the city bus to the courthouse because I had not told her she could come, and she had decided she was coming anyway. The bailiff moved toward her. Judge Sims held up a hand. "Who are you, young lady?" he said. "My name is Maya Mercer," she said. Her voice did not shake. "I'm one of the children this hearing is about." My brother turned in his chair. For the first time all morning, his composure slipped. He looked at her. The way you look at something you cannot quite believe is real. Maya did not look at him. She addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I know I'm not supposed to be here, but I need to say something and I think you should hear it before you decide anything." Patricia Oakes started to object. The judge cut her off with a look. "Speak," he said. Maya walked down the center aisle and stopped at the bar. She unzipped her backpack and removed her phone. She held it up. "Last Thursday," she said, "my father called our house. My uncle wasn't home. Cooper answered, and then got me. I listened to the whole conversation. I recorded it." She pressed play. The recording was clear. My brother's voice was unmistakable. "Cooper, hey. Listen, buddy. I know this is a lot, but your grandfather left some things. Some land and some money. And it's yours by right. I just need to be named your legal guardian so I can access it on your behalf. That's all this is. I'm going to get you and Maya set up real nice." Cooper's voice, flat and careful. "We're already set up." My brother's voice again, and here the patient warmth in it slipped just slightly. "I'm trying to do this the easy way, for everyone's sake. But if Dale decides to fight me on this, it's going to get ugly for him. He never filed the right papers. He has no legal standing. A judge is going to give you to me regardless. I just thought it'd be better if you understood why." Cooper's voice, quiet. "I understand why." And then my brother, apparently not realizing what he had said. "Good. So, you'll tell the judge you want to live with me." "Cooper, I'm going to tell the judge the truth." Then the call ended. The gallery had been still for the length of that recording, in the way that rooms only go still when something real has entered them. Not dramatic still, just real. The kind of quiet that settles when people hear truth spoken plainly. I looked at my brother. His face was gray. I looked at his lawyer. She had closed her portfolio. Judge Sims leaned forward. He looked at my brother for a long time. "Mr. Mercer," he said, and the way he said it was not angry. It was something worse. It was tired. "I've been on this bench for 22 years. In that time, I have made decisions in favor of biological parents that I have later regretted, because I believed that biology was the most important factor in a child's life. I have spent those 22 years learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, that it is not." He picked up the notarized document. "This document tells me that on the third day after you left your children, you signed a statement saying Dale Mercer was the right person to raise them. Not the courts. Not the state. You made that judgment. And then you left again." He set it down. "And now you've come back, not because you've missed them, which is what you told this court this morning under oath, but because there is money involved. I have this recording. I have your signed statement. I have 12 years of records showing a man who did the work you chose not to do." He looked at Patricia Oakes. "Counselor, I'm sanctioning you personally for bringing a fraudulent claim before this court. You knew about that statement. I have no doubt you knew. You filed anyway because you thought it was old enough to be dismissed or challenged." He shook his head. "It was notarized. The notary is deceased, which means the stamp stands unchallenged. This document is valid." He turned back to my brother. "Case dismissed. Mr. Mercer, you may pursue your right to visitation through the proper channels if you wish, but I'm granting Dale Mercer full formal guardianship of these children today. and I'm referring your testimony regarding the purpose of this filing to the district attorney's office. Making false statements to a family court is a crime in this state." The gavel came down. My brother sat very still for a moment. Then he stood up, slowly, and he straightened his jacket. He looked at his lawyer. She was already packing her bag, not looking at him. He looked at the judge, who had already turned away. He looked at me. I thought he might say something. We had grown up in the same house. We had ridden bikes down the same dirt roads. We had stood at the same grave when our mother died. And again, when our father died. Whatever had happened to him, whatever choices had bent him into the shape of the man standing in that courtroom, he was still the boy I had built a treehouse with when I was 11 years old. But he did not say anything. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and he walked out. Maya was standing beside me by then. I put my arm around her shoulders and she leaned into me slightly, the way she had not done in a couple of years, the way kids do when they are 16 and trying to be adults but still need to remember they don't have to be. Gerald was next to me, already gathering papers. "Congratulations," he said, very quietly. I did not feel like celebrating. I felt wrung out in the way that comes after something has been survived rather than won. Outside the courthouse, Russ was waiting by his truck in the parking lot. He had not been allowed in the courtroom, but he had driven down anyway and parked and waited the whole morning. When he saw us come through the doors, he read my face, and then he read Maya's face, and he let out a long, slow breath. "Done?" he said. "Done." He nodded once. He reached into his truck bed and produced a paper bag from the diner on Merchant Street, the one that has been there since before I was born. He handed it to Maya. "Ham biscuits," he said. "You look like you haven't eaten." Maya took the bag. She looked at Russ, this old half-deaf man who had spent the last 2 weeks quietly pulling strings on our behalf, who had driven an hour to sit in a parking lot just to be close when it was over. "Thank you," she said. Russ waved his hand in the way he does when he does not want to be thanked. "Go eat something," he said. "Both of you. Go eat something." The weeks after were quieter than I expected. I had braced for aftermath, for reverberations, for my brother to fight further. He did not. Patricia Oakes surrendered her license 6 months later, the details of which I was not privy to. But Russ told me about it over the phone with a satisfaction in his voice that I understood. My brother returned to Atlanta. He did not call. He did not write. I told myself that this was fine and that I believed it, and on most days that was true. What mattered was what happened at home. On the Saturday after the hearing, I was out in the barn replacing a belt on the old baler when Cooper appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a moment, watching me work, in the way he does when he is about to say something he has been thinking about for a while. "He's not going to come back," Cooper said. "Probably not," I said. "Good," he said. He came over and held the wrench I needed before I asked for it. Because he has been watching me work on things his whole life, and he knows how I work. We did not talk about it anymore that afternoon. We just fixed the baler. Maya took the transcript of the hearing and submitted it to her school's debate team as evidence for an essay on family law reform that won her a regional award 3 months later. I found out about this from her coach. "Thanks for watching time." Maya had not mentioned it. Russ came out for Thanksgiving. He brought 2 pies from the diner and ate more than a man his age should, and fell asleep in the armchair watching football, which has been his tradition since before Cooper was born. I watched him sleeping there in my father's old chair with the fire going, and Cooper stretched out on the floor doing homework, and Maya on the couch with her textbooks, and I thought about how family is assembled, not assigned, how it is the cumulative product of 10,000 ordinary moments, the meals and the arguments, and the drives to school, and the nights when someone is sick and someone else gets up without being asked. My brother signed his name on a piece of paper 12 years ago and told a notary that he knew he was not the right person. The cruelest thing I can say about him is that he was telling the truth. Not everyone who is capable of love is capable of the work that love requires. He knew that about himself at 31 years old, and he walked away from something he could not carry. I picked it up. I carried it, And standing in my kitchen on a November evening with the smell of pie in the air and the sound of my kids in the next room, I will tell you that there is no part of me that would trade a single day of it. Not one. People talk about blood like it is the deepest thing there is, like it settles all questions and closes all arguments. But I have been a firefighter. I know that blood just means something is living or was living recently. It does not tell you whether that living thing fought for you or stayed with you or sat up all night worried about you or drove an hour to a parking lot just to be nearby in case you needed them. That is something else entirely. That is a choice made over and over again, every ordinary day, until it becomes something so solid and real that no court document or lawyer's brief or man in a suit can simply walk up and take it away. Cooper found me on the porch later that night. The temperature had dropped, and the stars were out, and the fields were silver with frost. He stood next to me, and we looked at the land our grandfather had worked and left to us. "Is this ours?" he said. "Yeah," I said. "This is ours." He nodded. He shoved his hands in his pockets. 14 years old, quiet and serious, in a way that would serve him well for the rest of his life. "Good," he said again. And that was enough. That was everything.